It was an unusually warm autumn evening when I first saw the figure in the distance. The kind of warmth that clung to the air, heavy and oppressive, as if the heat itself didn't want to let go of the earth. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the mountain range to the west. I had just finished the long day of work at the ranch, sweat still beading on my brow as I prepared to head home, far up in the hills where the land was untamed and the night seemed to stretch forever. I'd heard stories about these hills, who hasn't? Skinwalkers, witches, legends of the Navajo, creatures that could shift their form, imitate voices, or wear the skins of animals and humans alike. Stories that were often dismissed by most people as superstitions. But there was a part of me, the quiet, instinctive part, that still took them seriously. After all, this wasn't some tourist town, this was the real wilderness, rugged, wild, and unforgiving. When you grew up on land like this, you learned to trust your gut and listen to the warnings in the whispers of the wind. It wasn't uncommon to hear the occasional coyote howl in the distance, or the rustling of branches, but tonight there was something different. The night was too still, the silence too heavy. I had the eerie feeling that I wasn't alone. At first, I chalked it up to the usual unease that came with being out there after dark, but then I saw it, movement in the trees. It was far off, just a silhouette at the edge of the thick pines. At first, I thought it might be a deer or one of the wild horses that roamed the hills. But as I watched, the shape shifted in a way that didn't make sense. It moved too fluidly, like it was walking on two legs, yet the way it bent and contorted its body reminded me of something much more unnatural. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I froze, unsure of whether to move or stay hidden. Every instinct told me to run, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. The figure didn't move like an animal. It was too deliberate, too controlled. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished behind a cluster of trees, leaving only the rustling of the branches in its wake. I should have turned back then. I should have gone home, locked up, and never thought of it again. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and the stubbornness of my nature wouldn't let me walk away. I moved towards the trees, every step feeling heavier, like the earth itself was pushing back against me. As I got closer, I noticed something else. The air had changed. The silence was deeper, more suffocating. There were no sounds of wildlife, no rustling leaves or chirping crickets. It was as if the whole forest was holding its breath. Then, I heard it. A voice. Soft at first, almost a whisper, carried on the wind. "Help me, please, help me." I froze again, my heart hammering in my chest. It sounded like a woman, but there was something wrong with the voice, something twisted, like the words were being dragged from her mouth, forced out by some unseen force. My mind screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. My feet were planted, my body refusing to obey the primal instinct to flee. "Please, I can't," the voice pleaded again, now closer. Too close. I turned slowly, eyes darting to the shadows between the trees. My breath caught in my throat as the figure emerged from the darkness. It was no longer a vague shape but a distinct form, standing on two legs. It was tall, unnaturally tall, its body hunched forward as if it were about to spring. The thing before me had the twisted, contorted shape of something that was part human, part animal. Its limbs were impossibly long, and its skin looked stretched and raw, like it had been pulled over to much muscle. The face, it had no face, at least not in the way I understood it. There were eyes, black and empty, set too far apart, and a mouth that seemed to stretch far wider than was natural. I stumbled backward, my legs giving way beneath me. The thing stepped forward, its body bending and twisting as it moved, its claws clicking against the rocks and dirt beneath it. "You can't leave," it said in that same voice, but now it was a rasp, a guttural mockery of human speech. The words sounded wrong, as if the creature was trying to mimic someone it had once known. The smell hit me then, an overwhelming, putrid stench of decay, of rotting flesh and wet earth. It was as though the very air was tainted by its presence. I gagged and tried to pull myself up, but my legs were weak, my body paralyzed by fear. The thing tilted its head, watching me with those dark, hollow eyes. It stepped closer, and with each step, its form seemed to shift, to contort in ways that defied logic. It didn't just look like an animal wearing a human skin, it felt like it was trying to be human. Like it was playing a game with me, trying to lure me in with something familiar. I could almost hear the edges of a memory in the voice it used, a memory of a loved one, someone who had once called out to me in the same way. But I knew better than to trust that. I had heard the warnings. It circled around me, its movements disjointed and unnatural. I could see its eyes gleaming in the dark, watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. Every inch of my skin screamed to run, but I couldn't bring myself to move. It was as if the very air had become thick and heavy, pressing in on me. Then, I remembered something my grandmother had told me when I was a child, a story passed down from her Navajo ancestors. She'd warned me that skinwalkers, those who had given up their humanity for power, could only mimic voices they had heard before. That they could wear the skins of animals, or even people, to deceive their prey. But there was one rule: they could only imitate the voice of someone they had killed. Suddenly, the weight of the situation hit me all at once. This wasn't just a wild animal or a shadow in the trees. This was something older, something more malevolent. I had heard the stories, yes, but I had never truly believed them, until now. "Do you remember me?" the creature asked, its voice shifting into something I almost recognized. A voice from my past, my mother, long gone, dead in a car crash when I was just a boy. It was her voice. Soft, gentle, pleading for help. "No," I whispered, shaking my head, trying to block it out. "No, you're not her." The creature stopped, its expression shifting. Its eyes narrowed, as if it was studying me, trying to understand why its trick hadn't worked. And then it smiled. But not with lips. The smile was something much more unsettling. Its mouth split open in a grotesque, gaping maw, revealing rows of jagged, needle-like teeth that seemed to stretch impossibly wide. It lunged at me then, its claws slashing through the air. But instinct kicked in. I scrambled back, my hands catching on a rock as I fell. I had no plan, no clear path, but I knew I had to get out of there. I couldn't outrun it, but I could get to higher ground, somewhere the thing couldn't follow. I pushed myself up, my heart pounding in my chest, and I ran, stumbling, crashing through the underbrush, ignoring the branches that slapped at my face and the rocks that caught at my feet. Behind me, I heard the thing's steps, fast, relentless, too close. It was gaining on me. I didn't look back. I ran until my legs burned, until the world around me was a blur of trees and shadows. Finally, I reached the ridge that overlooked the valley where my cabin stood. I collapsed on the ground, gasping for air, and dared to glance behind me. The thing wasn't there. The forest was still. But I knew it was waiting. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. And when the sun rose the next morning, I packed up everything I could carry and left the ranch for good. They say that skinwalkers don't forget, that once they mark you, they never let you go. I've heard whispers in the night ever since. The voice, soft and pleading, sometimes even calling my name. And I know now that I can never outrun it. It is out there, waiting, always watching, always listening. And someday, it will come for me again.